I do think it's nice, this kind of format for the legacy talks. I think it opens it up to a much broader audience. So just a side note. All right, the next 20 minutes, we're going to do a lot of things. I want to tell you a little bit about the Xerces Society, and also NRCS, who I work for. I'm going to do a real brief history of pollinator conservation, kind of specifically in North America. Tell you about the work that Xerces has done in Nebraska, what we're doing now, and what we want to do in the future. So if you've been tuning in at all this week, sort of the looking back, looking forward perspective from the Xerces standpoint. So I will introduce you to the Xerces Society. I'm not sure who all is on, so some of you might be really familiar with our work. We're a nonprofit organization that focuses on invertebrate conservation. We were founded in 1971, so next year will be our 50th anniversary. Hopefully, we're not in a pandemic anymore, we can have a real big party, but we will see. We do a really wide variety of activities surrounding invertebrates, including education, conservation, research, advocacy, some policy work. We are based out of Portland, Oregon as our home office, but remote staff now outnumbers our Portland staff. So I don't know if I need to keep telling people we're from Portland. We do some science related work. We work with public agencies and private landowners, mostly doing work with rare and at-risk invertebrates and pollinators. And again, a lot of that work does happen in the Pacific Northwest just because a lot of our staff is there. Recently, we've been doing a lot more community science, which is really exciting. Working with Bumblebee Watch, we do monarch counts, Thanksgiving counts on the Western population, so the population that lives on the West Coast and overwinters there, we do the counts for that population. We also have the Bumblebee Atlas here in Nebraska that we're super jazzed about. We have a Bumblebee Atlas in the Pacific Northwest, and recently launched one in Missouri as well. So we do love community science and getting people engaged with the natural world and the invertebrates around them. We'd also do a ton of education and outreach. A lot of this is to kind of conservation professionals, landowners, food producers, farmers, ranchers. And yeah, we used to travel to a lot of conferences to do that. Now we do a lot of Zoom conferences. We've done trainings in all 50 states on pollinators, as well as outside of the US. We recently merged with Bee City USA, which is an organization that helps support communities' work to make their cities more bee friendly. It's a really cool program, and it helps those cities kind of engage in pollinator conservation. They have to do some outreach. They have to have a plan approved by the city council. They have to put in habitat. They have to have pesticide regulations. It's pretty unique and interesting. We have over 120 bee cities in the United States right now. There are none in Nebraska. We need to work on that. There's some rumblings, but we'll see if it happens. But I would love to get a bee city in Nebraska. We also have Bee Campus, which is the same concept, but on college campuses. And we do have a bee campus in Nebraska. Central Community College in Grand Island is our sole bee campus here in Nebraska. We also do work in the food supply chain. So we have a certification program. It's basically certifying farms as sort of bee friendly. And in some ways similar to Bee City, they have to mitigate for pesticide use. A percentage of the farm has to go into pollinator habitat. Just a lot of considerations. Right now we're working mostly with pretty large farms throughout this kind of supply chain work. Finally, we do a lot of on-the-ground conservation, and a lot of that is through our partnership with USDA, which I'll talk about. So I mentioned NRCS and USDA, land of acronyms when you work for the federal government. Within the U.S. Department of Agriculture, there is the Natural Resources Conservation Services, or NRCS, which is an organization that was formed in 1935, kind of in response to devastation during the Dust Bowl, to help farmers kind of overcome those challenges and do more conservation-minded farming so that we didn't have another Dust Bowl. So it was Soil Conservation Services, now NRCS, and basically provide financial support and technical support for conservation on farms and ranches. And we provide all the technical assistance for farm bill programs. We have field offices nationwide. You can get online. I think we have 77 field offices in Nebraska, so there's definitely one near you. I want to talk about these 3 Farm Bill programs because I will kind of talk a little bit about how it's helped with each one here in Nebraska. So the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, or EQIP, is kind of a usually 1 to 3 year contract, really meant to jumpstart conservation practices. And we do have monarch and pollinator practices within EQIP. So Conservation Stewardship Program, or CSP, is a 5-year program which you can kind of re-enroll in. And this is really considered a program that's for producers that are really dedicated to conservation. They want to go above and beyond and do the extra step. They have to meet multiple resource concerns. So you're usually kind of battling things on all kinds of fronts when you're in CSP. And we've got monarch, pollinator, beneficial insect, and other invertebrate-based practices within CSP, which is really exciting. There's a lot of flexibility in that program. And finally, kind of the final program we do a lot of pollinator work with in Nebraska is the Conservation Reserve Program, or CRP, which is a land retirement program. So taking land out of agricultural production, it's a 10 to 15-year contract. People typically do want to re-enroll, and there are pollinator options within CRP. So kind of in the NRCS landscape, these are some of the programs and ways that we're putting habitat on the ground in Nebraska. All right, now I'm going to back it up real quickly and talk about the history of pollinator conservation. So really, we're a relatively young field. However, there's some kind of outstanding entomologists and environmentalists who were ringing the warning bell long ago, and I could not help but highlight Edith Patch here, who is just was an incredible female entomologist. She helped create the Department of Entomology at the University of Maine. She was the first female president of the Entomological Society of America. Just an outstanding entomologist who really ahead of her time in calling out the use of pesticides and the decline of insect populations in the United States. So next time you're Googling, feel free to look up Edith Patch. And I also included this really lovely quote from our program director, May Spahn, who called Edith Patch the patron saint of insect conservation. So as early as like 1920s and 1930s, she was talking about insect declines and the use of pesticides, which is kind of exciting. We do have some early publications from the USDA highlighting wild bees and how great they are for pollination. But really, we didn't see a lot of interest or work or money or research in pollinator conservation until the early 2000s. In the mid 90s and late 90s, Xerces and the Pollinator Partnership both started some pollinator campaigns to try to attract interest to insect declines. And then from then until about 2006, we did see some growth in the work of pollinator conservation, but it really wasn't until we started seeing colony collapse disorder and there was a report on the status of pollinators released that we really started to see money and funding for pollinators. So in 2008, the Farm Bill made all pollinators a conservation program priority, which really turned NRCS's attention to pollinators, and we started doing pollinator plantings pretty much right away. In 2017, General Mills, NRCS, and Xerces put pollinator conservation biologists in field offices across the nation. I think there was only 6 of us in field offices. I think maybe now we have 10 or 12, so we're covering some pretty big areas, but we get a lot of work done. And finally, this is kind of just linguistics, but this last year, invertebrates are and finally included as an official part of wildlife resource concerns within NRCS, which is actually a huge step forward to have those acknowledged in those ways. I'm going to talk about, oh good, I'm good on time. Okay, Xerces in Nebraska. I was worried. So the earliest kind of Xerces interaction I could find in Nebraska was in 2007. So that's a photo of our executive director, Scott Black. And he helped out with UNL's study surveys for the Salt Creek tiger beetle near Lincoln. And we're lucky Scott Black actually was born and raised in Omaha, Nebraska. So he's a native. Sorry, Jamie. I was getting a pop-up that's saying I was muted, but I'm not, right? Okay, thanks. Sorry about that. Okay, so Scott is actually from Omaha, so he tries not to be partial, but he definitely knows how excellent Nebraska is and gives us some love. In 2009, we've got some funding from a sustainable ag organization to do pollinator short courses. So in 2011, we had our first pollinator short course here in Nebraska, and that really connected Xerces staff here in the region to NRCS staff and made some really good connections here in Nebraska. In late 2016, early 2017, we identified Nebraska as one of the states that would really benefit from having a pollinator conservationist on the NRCS staff. And then I was hired in kind of mid-2017 to work with our state and field offices with NRCS. Maybe. So a lot of the work that I've been doing is not super exciting. I mean, it is, but it's not fancy pictures of flowers outside. So when I came on board, we really needed a lot of kind of technical documents and guidance for the state, for the region. So that was some of the first work that I did. In tandem with our staff in North Dakota, we created a pollinator plants list for the Northern Plains region, which is a pretty short list, but it's nice to get out to kind of the general public of some species that they can use for pollinators in their region. Next, we worked on a pretty big interseeding document, kind of going step by step through how to successfully increase wildflower diversity into existing grasslands using seed. And that was requested by and funded in part by the Farm Service Agency, which is another arm of the USDA. They administer the CRP program, and a lot of those early CRP plantings, even through the 90s, were really, really grass dominant, typically anywhere from 2 to 10 species of grass. And so when those are getting re-enrolled and we want to meet new resource concerns, including wildlife, we need to boost up the diversity somehow. So figuring out how to successfully do that was a huge goal for FSA. These are both available on our website. And finally, this just recently came out. We've been working on this for a long time. It's a document for producers to kind of guide rangeland management and pollinators. So it lays out really broad strategies that support both livestock and pollinators, and including things like grazing management, obviously prescribed fire, haying, brush and weed control, kind of all covered in that document. I think Xerces does documents really, really well, and we're always open to collaborate on documents that meet our mission and your mission. So if you've got an idea for something that you feel like Nebraska has a need for pollinators or monarchs or beneficial insects, please reach out. We'd love to work with you. Within NRCS, these are sort of the programs that I've talked about. I've really done a ton of updates in the last 3 years to our technical guidance that is used by our field offices throughout the state to create pollinator habitat. So really all of those kind of practice standards and guidance documents that are guiding how we do site preparation, site selection, the seed mix that we're putting in, the plant species that are going into the seed mix, the percentage of grass and wildflowers that are going into those, when and how we're seeding, and the management strategies that we use on those types of plantings. I've been working through guidance for those for NRCS for the last few years. Habitat evaluation guides is another one, specifically for monarch habitat. That's been one area of work that I usually get pulled into a lot of the on-the-ground projects for monarchs, which is really fun. I've created a really comprehensive pollinator plants list of native Nebraska plants that work for pollinators, and tried to really hone in on the species that we're planting across these programs. So eliminating a lot of the non-natives that we're typically used, and sort of trying to limit our use of non-natives to certain species. And also the use of kind of regionally native things that are native to prairies, but maybe not native to Nebraska, and putting some bounds on how much of those species that we use in our mixes. Been really fun. Additionally, I did pretty extensive surveys of past planted CRP pollinator plots in different regions of the state to try to inform some of our management and see where those pollinator plantings were standing within CRP. So I got to go outside and look at plants, which was really wonderful. Let's see where I'm at for time. Okay. I'll highlight these two contracts that I worked with kind of on the ground because they were really fun. I think they were both within EQIP and kind of both near Lincoln. This was an interseeding project that we did through EQIP. And this large patch that they burned that you see here was interseeded with a pollinator mix. And we used that prescribed fire to kind of clear the litter and also control brush before interseeding. And this was an example of an expired CRP that was just really heavily grass dominant. And this one has been really fun to work on because the landowner has a drone and loves it and sends me all kinds of photos, which is super fun. So we did this as sort of the first area. We're going to do their entire property, and one of the plantings will be a monarch planting. So they've just been really flexible and awesome. The other one that has been exciting lately, and I've been able to visit frequently because it's near Lincoln, is another EQIP contract with a landowner that has a kind of small herd of cattle. They're grazing, and they've got a kind of a creek watershed that was just covered with eastern red cedar. So they've been removing those cedars. It's been just amazing to watch this landscape transform. And then we will go through and seed into that. They're going to do a prescribed burn in that area. And then we'll kind of wrap up that contract in a few years by doing a prescribed grazing plan to control some of the non-native cool season grasses and encourage our warm season grasses. So sort of being able to use a whole bunch of tools in the toolbox on this contract has been really fun. And I love getting pulled into them.
You're at about 2 minutes till question and answer time, Ray.
Perfect. Thanks, Jamie. I'll talk briefly about the Nebraska Bumblebee Atlas, which is one of our community science initiatives that has been supported with funding from the Nebraska Environmental Trust, and we're partnering with the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. This is engaging people across the state to do bumblebee surveys, so we can get a better idea of where our bumblebees are in the state, the species diversities that we still have around. And here's a photo of Katie, if you've been involved at all with the Bumblebee Atlas. She's our Xerces staff member who's managing this, this atlas. And we just had a meeting about it, and she said we have over 2,000 observations of bumblebees from just last year and this year's season. So really exciting. And yeah, we want to continue that work for sure. Looking forward for Nebraska, definitely continuing our work with NRCS and growing that work with NRCS has been a huge goal. We want to make sure that that funding gets renewed to maintain this position, and that we can keep refining how we're doing pollinator work in the state on these private lands and just keep getting better at it. Nebraska has just an amazing network of conservation professionals, and just continuing to build those relationships. It seems like lately there's been a lot of call for community resources and school resources, education resources. We get asked for those things a lot, and we just don't have them. So we would love to develop some of those pieces. As part of the Bumblebee Atlas, we'll be doing some bumblebee habitat trainings for conservation professionals and landowners. And finally, both Jenny and I, Jenny Hopwood, who's in Omaha, who's also a Xerces staff member, we definitely would love to engage more with ranchers in our state and also with grazing management. I think we recognize what an incredible value these ranch lands are to our invertebrates in Nebraska. So yeah, and especially when we're looking at our bumblebees, our most rare species are found on those kind of intact grasslands. And also we get really excited about dung beetles. So we would love to do more work with dung beetles. We are a member-based organization. We have incredible donors. If you want to be a Xerces member, visit the website. And we have a ton of supporters that are amazing. So with that, I will take any questions.